The one-state solution for a very simple reason. There is no other solution. The one-state solution is inevitable. It is already happening. We just have to get used to it. Israel and Palestine already live in a single territory. They already have a single currency, a single market, a single political and economic ecosystem. Yes, it's not a fair system. Some have called it an apartheid system. It is a system in which not all parties are equal, that is for certain. The Israelis at this point call all the shots, that's true. But the notion of equity in that situation is actually far more realizable, far more easily realizable than the issue of two states living side by side. In fact, the notion of a Palestinian-Israeli confederation, wherein the two people share joint political and economic institutions while at the same time maintaining a sense of semi-autonomy and preserving their cultural and religious distinctions, is actually not that far-fetched of an idea. Similar arrangements have been based on one state for two peoples in other very bloody conflict zones, South Africa, Bosnia, Northern Ireland. The difference, of course, between a binational state and the two-state solution is that in a binational state, you have something akin to the territorial divisions that you have in two states, but with soft borders and the blurring of these symbolic issues like the status of Jerusalem or the question of refugees and the issue of the settlers, etc. What we are talking about here is mutual recognition, the kind that would allow for the preservation of the cultural and religious character of the two peoples at the national level, be it an Israeli president and a Palestinian prime minister or vice versa, whatever the case may be, or while at the same time preserving this sort of culturally homogeneous regions that already exist at the ground level in the local regions. That's what we mean when we say a binational state. Now, the one-state solution, I understand, is hard to imagine. Admittedly, the violence of the past decades would make peace just as difficult to imagine in a single state as it would through partition. And certainly it requires some sacrifices on the part of both the Palestinians and the Israelis that may be very, very difficult to swallow. On the Palestinian side, it requires giving up the dream of sovereignty, of total sovereignty, and putting away the impossible notion of the right of return. Though I should mention that as unpopular as the one-state solution is amongst Palestinians, it's gaining traction. In fact, it went from 64% in 2009 who supported it to 57% in 2011. On the Israeli side, what the binational state means is that the dream of an ethno-nationalist Jewish majority state would have to remain just that, a dream. Now that may be a sad reality to a lot of people, I understand that. But I do want to emphasize that this reality that I'm speaking of is the inevitable result of an Israeli occupation, of an Israeli policy of occupation, that has forced it to confront a post-Zionist vision for the country. However hard that might be to understand, however hard it might be for Israelis to swallow, this is the sad reality. They brought it upon themselves. Israel created the death of its own state through its suicidal occupation policy, and there is no turning back at this point. Again, what we hear from the other side, just to finish, what we hear from the other side when confronted with the reality that I speak is that a binational state is impossible. It's impossible to imagine a single state with these two people living side by side. The mechanism for it is impossible to imagine. It's not impossible, but I will tell you what is impossible. The two states predicated on the idea, which has to be what two states is predicated on, two states predicated on the idea of a fair and equitable division of land, that's impossible. Two states predicated on the notion of an equal distribution of resources, that's impossible. Two states with power equally divided, with a Palestinian state having room for immigration, for control over its borders, control over its sea routes, control over its airspace, a vibrant military force for defense, all of which is utterly necessary to be actually considered a state. That is impossible. And for me, that in and of itself is the final point. That tells me that the two-state solution as we know it is dead. And I, for one, say good riddance.
Good.